Welcome to Unapologetically Technical. This is the show that's different. We go deep, we go all the way down. With me today is my good friend Holden Karau. She is the co-founder of Fight Health Insurance. Welcome to the show, Holden. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit more?
Awesome. Thank you for having me. This is wonderful. So I'm Holden. I've worked in sort of the big data space for a little bit over 15 years. I've done most of FAANG, with notable exception, I haven't done Meta. And I was relatively early at Databricks. I've been working on Fight Health Insurance for a while, full-time this year, and it's been super stressful, but also great learning experience. And so we've been helping people appeal health insurance denials using AI and data tools. And that's pretty great to actually get to build things all the way to the end, because I've mostly spent the past 15 years just building tools for other people to build tools. And so it's kind of cool to build actual things again. Lots of fun, though. Yeah.
Oh, good. And this conversation reminds me of the Game of Thrones episode, just in case you want to know it. It's called Unbent, Unbowed, Unbroken. And the reason I say that is that it's like you don't have a corporate master that you're afraid of dealing with. So we will get Holden at full throttle.
Fair. I will say I've never been particularly great at filtering myself from my corporate overlords, so I'm not entirely sure it's going to be all that different.
So the last time I had you on the show, you set the record for the number of F-bombs. Is this just going to be, am I going to have to spend an hour editing this episode of your explanation?
No. I will do my best to dial it back so that you can get this on Apple Podcasts without having to kill yourself on the editing floor.
Yeah, so if you see Holden's mouth moving and there's no audio, it's not a problem. It's just an F-bomb.
Yeah, okay, I'll do my best. Okay.
So as you rightly mentioned, you are FAANG. It's weird. Some people on LinkedIn, they worked for 5 minutes at one of the FAANG and that's their thing. They were whatever at Google for 5 minutes. But you've done them all except for Meta. So if you're a Meta recruiter, help Holden out. You can recruit her now and complete the entire sentence.
So I actually do have a Meta recruiter who's trying to get me to go over there right now. So it's okay. If you're a Meta recruiter, don't worry. Your colleagues are already on the task. Yeah.
So is FAANG all it's cracked up to be?
Sorry?
Is FAANG all it's cracked up to be?
I would say no in a lot of ways. I mean, it's certainly interesting, right? Like generally at those companies, you tend to be dealing with relatively large scale, right? And that's quite entertaining. And you get to encounter certain problems that only happen at truly large scale. But on the flip side, I think back to my time at like Foursquare, where we had, it was enough data to fit on like 3 machines, and we were still able to do like a lot of really cool stuff. And because, the data, it was beyond fits on one machine, but it wasn't at the like needs a whole data center to process level. Like we were able to do a lot more sort of cool exploration stuff. And so I really enjoyed that time. The other thing is like the FAANG recruiting process is a little intense, and it's kind of, I would say, distinct from the skills that you end up using while you're at those companies, right? And so it's definitely just like getting in there is kind of a pain, especially compared to a lot of other companies which might have a more practical approach to figuring out who they want working there. Oh, and I think that's the professor coming to visit. Yeah. Do you want to come say hi to Jesse, or do you not want to be kicked out? What do you think? Okay. Yeah. Oh. No, okay, he's running away. But we've got a Carolyn. Carolyn, say hello.
Look, with a special appearance by Carolyn.
Yeah.
Hi.
Special guest appearance by Carolyn.
I want to go shower now.
Yeah, you're wearing a Scala shirt.
Oh yeah, I'm Ramona's.
Yeah. We can talk about Python later. But no, and so actually, okay, some like great things came out of working at FAANG for me, right? Like, so for example, at Alphabet and Google, that's probably where I actually learned how to do a good code review, right? And like that is something that no one ever taught me beforehand. And that was amazing, right? That's a skill that I've carried forward with me today. Amazon is where I learned, how to keep systems up despite them being written in Perl. Right? It's just like, despite all odds, the software will keep running. And Apple, I learned how to make things work when people can't tell you what the hell they're building, which was not a skill that I really particularly care about. But it was interesting, right? It was very fascinating. And the scale of data was just so huge. And then Netflix, to me, has always felt like kind of the weird one in the FAANG group. Like, I feel like it was picked to make the acronym work. Like, they've got some amazing talent, like truly amazing talent, but the scale is just not the same as the other companies. And so super interesting, but very, very different than Amazon, Apple, and Alphabet / Google. And there's much less, I would say, when you talk to people at big companies, right, it's always like, hey, it varies a lot from team to team. But I would say for me at Netflix, that was the point where I realized, like, oh yeah, it really varies a lot from team to team. Like, there is, or at least there was, no real standard for what it meant to make software, right? Everything was like, here's some suggestions, do what you want. And Amazon, Apple, Google, here are some suggestions, you better follow them. Otherwise, we're going to come and find you. And so that was a bit different. And in some ways, it made Netflix a bit more like a startup, admittedly, a startup with way too much data and money. But different than the rest. I don't know what Meta's like because I've never been there, but I've heard people work even harder. So I think I can take a brief break on that because the startup definitely seems to be quite a lot of work.
Yes. I can't imagine working at a big company like you would at a startup. But you had my interest peaked. You said you learned how to do a code review right. How do you do a code review right?
So, okay, I guess I should clarify. Like, there are probably many other valid ways to do a code review, right? Like, this is just the one that I learned at Google, and I was like, oh, this makes sense to me, right? And I feel like I can actually help people with this. And so the other thing was at Google, the thing that made it possible for me to do that was we weren't moving all that quickly, right? We were like a big company, right? And it's like, cool, here's some code. And I would normally get like a giant pile of code and be like, I have no idea what the hell is going on here. And so then it would be like, okay, I've never heard of this library before that this person is using. We're going to go and learn what that library does, right? And then it'll be like, okay, go through this. What are kind of the assumptions this person is making, and do those assumptions match sort of what I've learned of this library? And if not, like, has what I've learned of this library incorrect, or is this code incorrect? And often it's like, well, there's a mismatch here. We should probably have some tests around this. But that was, for me, it was really just like, you actually have to take a lot more time and go kind of just beyond just the code that you see, right? Which is, I think, what I'd been doing up until that point, which was like looking at it and being like, okay, yeah, the parts of the flow control that I see here make sense. This looks fine. but it's also just like, do you actually understand the components that this person is using? And if not, you have to take the time to learn those components. Not necessarily 100%, but like enough that you can convince yourself that what they're doing is correct, or even better, ideally, find places where what they're doing doesn't actually match that library, right? And I'd say I had that happen a few times at Google where like someone would use a tool, I would have never heard of it or I would have never used it. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to go and read a little bit about this tool, get a like sort of base level understanding, come back to this code, look at it, and then like, and this is also, I'm an open source nerd, so it's like, cool, this is how they're using the tool. Let's go and look at that part of the tool and see if that actually does what they think it does. And a lot of the times it would be like, no, it's not actually behaving the way this person has assumed it's going to. So like, this is actually going to cause production issues later. And I think for me, it's just like the going beyond the surface level of the code review is not something that I'd really done before I was at Google.
That is,
Another thing,
that is pretty deep, yeah.
yeah, it's going to take a lot of time, right? And then especially in today's wonderful world of like these AI generated PRs that I have super mixed feelings about, like you will quite frequently spend a lot more time doing your code review than like writing the code. The difference, of course, is like with something like Spark, right? Like I might spend a really, really long time like making relatively small changes because it's like you spend all this time like reasoning about it and then writing the reasoning down, and then the code review is less bad because you've got this reasoning that you can read and double check more easily. But yeah.
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. So you graduated from the University of Waterloo in math,
Yep.
computer science, and during that time you were doing some of your own companies where you created an Evil Death Ray. You were a software developer and an owner. Tell me about this Evil Death Ray and how many people did you kill?
So Evil Death Ray was not my own company. That was actually an official job title from an employer. And that employer has since got acquired by IBM. I'm pretty certain that they no longer call their QA staff Evil Death Rays. So that was essentially automated QA, Evil Death Ray. So write scripts to just test these Linux servers. It was a really good experience. And one of the core people behind that company is now one of the core people behind Tailscale, the VPN. And really, I much respect for their technical prowess, for being able to build some really cool stuff like that. But yeah, I did also run sort of a small consulting shop while I was in university. And we actually, did a little bit more than just consulting, but there was Aid RSS, was like a small startup out of Waterloo, which got on Slashdot and then immediately fell over. I don't know if you remember the Slashdot effect, right? Like, certainly aging ourselves here, but they were like, oh God, our site fell over. Quick, can anyone like help us scale? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I can make that work for you. Like, give me a week's worth of money and I'll keep your site up for a week. And it was a mixture of AWS stuff, but then also just like, cool, where is this like Ruby code doing something stupid? Okay, cool. We don't actually need to parse all of this XML. We can just kind of like half-ass this because we don't actually need this part. And, various hacks to just keep their stuff alive. I implemented an early source code search engine. It was probably one of the things that sort of lined me up for getting into the big data space. I was really interested in search problems at the time, and this was around the time when there were a few other people sort of thinking about like how search for source code might be different from like search for web documents. Since then, of course, SourceGraph has been created and does a much better job than any of us did at the time. And then also, classic consulting stuff where it's like, okay, someone needs something built. Sure, I can find the 6 people it's going to take to put this together for you on the cheap. Because you don't really hire a university student contractor unless you're maybe, let's go with a value conscious consumer.
Value conscious, I like that. As well as, let me find where this Ruby code is bad. I just hit a select A, select all.
I mean, fair. And it's like, yeah, it was a Rails app, right? And so it was definitely just like, oh, yeah, I mean, I can keep this running, but it is going to be rough. And they actually went on to get acquired by Google. Worked out for them. Of course, the service was turned off, so it was probably an acqui-hire. Nothing wrong with those, but really, really interesting people. Probably like that was the first. Like it was not VC backed at the time that they got on Slashdot. It was VC backed shortly thereafter. But it was like the first like traditional startup-y looking type thing that I was properly involved with. And so I definitely got the vibes of like, yeah, this is how we do it. Then interestingly enough, I got mono. And so then I was like, I can't keep working at this, startup. Good luck, guys. And they gave me some money. It was nice. Worked out.
Oh, well, I guess you got over your mono enough to do your internship at Amazon and Microsoft. How was that?
Yeah. I mean, like I recovered from mono. Took a few months. Microsoft internship was super fascinating. I really learned what a program manager does, and I learned that I am not that personality trait. Like it's rough. And it's not a great fit for me. But it was really fascinating to like see how Microsoft built software. I was in the Visual Studio team. And at the time, most of the people working on the Visual Studio team were not using Visual Studio, which was interesting. Definitely not a eat your own dog food situation. And I assume that's probably changed because they were continuing to try and improve a lot, and that was many years ago. And like now, even I will sometimes use Visual Studio because it's got some pretty great tools, and I didn't think I was ever going to be one of those people. I think in my interview I bonded with the person over Emacs, which is really weird for an interview for an IDE, but whatever. And then Amazon internship was fascinating. It was probably the first place that I'd been where I saw people put Perl in production. And I was like, oh man, these people are crazy. This is going to be amazing. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I wrote Perl code. We did a lot of cool stuff, but it was also definitely like, so Amazon, after the internship, I went back full time. And as an intern, you don't get a pager. As a full-time, you get a pager. And that's when I saw the downsides of putting Perl code in production.
Yeah, little did you know, your Perl code was so good that they said, yeah, we'll hire you.
Yeah, not a statement that people say a lot now anymore about Perl. But yeah, they were actually like, yeah, this looks pretty cool. And like, to be fair, like I loved it. It was amazing. I met a whole bunch of people, and like actually, like, this is one of the things about the internships. Like, I met a lot of people from like across America, which was really interesting because, like, I was in small town Canada, had met mostly Canadians at that point in my life. So it's definitely like, oh, cool. Here's a bunch of other people with a lot of different views and approaches to the world. And Seattle is certainly different than Waterloo.
Well, speaking of Seattle, you went to Foursquare, and you mentioned it earlier. What did you like about Foursquare?
Yeah, so it was a relatively small startup, and it was a Scala shop, and that was fascinating. The other job that I was debating at the time was Twitter. I think it would have gone better if I'd gone to Twitter money wise, because Foursquare did not IPO and Twitter did. But it was great. Like, we had a pretty well defined problem, right? And it was definitely like it was a really core business problem, right? So like figuring out where someone is when they want to go and check in on Foursquare is like that's essentially, I don't want to say the whole thing, but it's a large part of the thing, right? And so it was like, cool, I've got this really, really important problem. We have a solution that doesn't really work very well. How do we make it work better? And so that was really great. And I think for me at the time, that was exactly the right sized problem for me, because it was like sufficiently well defined that I was able to just think about it from a technical standpoint and not have to think about like a lot of weird business stuff and, how are these three different teams going to be? It's like, no, it's a tiny startup. We have to do this thing, otherwise we fail. So go do it. And that was pretty great. I really, really enjoyed that. It's where I learned Scala. I remember it was also when I was hired, I was the one person. So the company was based out of New York, and they were trying to start a West Coast office. And so they hired, I want to say, 3 or 4 people. And I was hired on the basis that I knew Scheme and Java. And that was pretty close to someone that would know Scala or be able to pick it up pretty quickly. It's like, functional programming and JVM, that's as close as we're going to get to someone that knows Scala in 2011. And so that was fun because I got to learn a bunch. But then also, there were some other amazing software engineers who they hired who had like no idea what the hell Git was, right? Because they came from like big companies, right? Like Microsoft, Source Depot, aka Perforce, right? And it was just like, oh yeah, I've done a bunch of sketchy projects here. I can like teach you some random things, and so that was nice. I got to do a bit of teaching, as well as a lot of learning. So that was pretty fun. I ended up getting into a disagreement with the HR staff at Foursquare, and that was entertaining. But you live and learn. Live and learn.
Just like what I tell my kids, it's better to learn those things early on than later on.
For sure. And it was the kind of disagreement where it's like, how do I say? This is the one where, like, knowing what I know now, I would have probably still had that same disagreement with them, but I would have gone about it in a different way. But yeah. She didn't really want to be HR, and I think that was part of the problem. As at startups, you end up wearing a bunch of hats that you don't really want to wear, and so she was kind of resentful of the fact she had to wear that hat.
You get that in a startup. I've hit that before.
100%. Where people are just like, I don't want to be dealing with this, and I'm kind of annoyed at you for making me even have to do this part of my job, because like I just want to do this other part of my job. And it's like, yeah, but this is still part of your job.
Well, so from there you went to Google and you started working on Google Plus. Are you to blame for Google Plus?
I am not. I joined late enough that I was not included in the Google Plus Hawaii offsite. Very sad. Very sad. But I do remember, like, I joined and my manager was like, I'm really sorry. Like, you have to have been at the company for like more than a month to come to the Hawaii offsite. But like, also just don't do any work next week. if you want to come in, you should come in and like get coffee and eat some food, but like don't do any work because none of us are going to be doing any work. And I was like, okay, that's pretty nice still. Not to blame for Google Plus. I did help with recommendations, engine stuff, and some storage stuff around chat high watermarks, which I feel like I'm one of the few people still on Google Hangouts to this day. And part of that is because I like wrote some of that code, but like I'm starting to just give up on Hangouts and migrate over to Signal like everyone else.
I'm still on Google Chat. You can...
Okay, we can be friends on Google Chat. Yeah, I mean, I guess how do I say this? My friend group is all migrating to like Signal and WhatsApp and stuff like that. But like, yeah, I still use Google Chat for like business stuff.
So part of what's kept me on Google Chat is my entire relationship with my wife is on Google Chat. So I can go look at the very first, way back when chats with her.
That's so cool.
And it's all from Holden. I have you to thank for that.
I did a very, very small part of that. Very, very small part of that.
Okay. Well, we'll give you some credit.
Thank you.
So you went to Databricks from there. You were employee number 12, which I looked the other day. I didn't realize that. I knew you were early. And that was when we originally met. We originally met while you were at Databricks. And you were speaking at a Strata.
Yeah. Yeah. That was hilarious. That was such a... So I will say, Databricks was like probably... It's the job where I had to do the most work of any of these other jobs, right? Like it was definitely, a lot of the parts of the Silicon Valley TV show. You're like, oh yeah, okay. We didn't all live in a house together, thank God. But I do remember them being like, yeah, listen, like if you're working too late, don't worry. I've got some guest passes for the gym around the corner where you can go shower. And I'm like, no, that's okay. I would really like to make it home every day. That's one of my life goals, is to go home every day when I'm working, and sleep in a bed instead of on the floor underneath my desk. And that was definitely just like the first sign that like, oh, wow, these people are really intense. And like, clearly it has worked out for them. But yeah, and so I actually wrote the first book about Spark before I joined Databricks. I wrote it while I was still at Google, and because I wrote that book, I think that's why the Databricks people hired me, because they were just like, "Who is this person that wrote a book about Spark? And like, why are they not working at our startup? We should fix this." And then I co-wrote the second book about Spark with the Databricks people.
Yeah, that was kind of how it was at Clutter, as that if you wrote anything about it, they would just kind of suck you in eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I kind of miss those days in a way. Like, I don't know. Because I'm a sucker for books. I think that there's something to be said for the sitting down, taking all that time to distill the information. And then I think as part of it, like you tend to realize like, oh God, this experience is really shitty. We should go and fix some of these things. And then you go and do that and you come back. But it's definitely like, it's not, I worry that they're going to continue to be devalued, which makes me sad.
Yeah, I spent a bunch of time thinking about this just recently too. I was thinking about why I haven't written more lately, and it's because what I'm writing just becomes fodder for an AI, or actually what's worse was it became fodder for one of the influencers to just completely rip off and steal and say that they wrote it or did it. And I'm like, what the hell, you guys can't rub two brain cells together and you're coming up with this?
Yeah, I will say, so thank God, back in like 2014, the concept of a data influencer, I don't think really existed. Because data science was not sexy, right? It was like, oh yeah, you know Python, SQL, and don't write Excel spreadsheets, but you answer questions from me. Okay. And like, yeah, I think there's something to be said for, and this is something that I've like often wondered about, is like the people who are building the thing are not always, like, they don't always have the time to write the super detailed stuff about it, but it's the, I feel like you want someone who is close-ish to the building of the thing to write about it, because otherwise you get things that just like don't make sense, right? Like I'll read a lot of these things where people will be like, you can do this, and I'm like, no, you can't. I know that. I wrote that code. That does not fucking work that way. And I've had this in interviews before, where people are like, yeah, so like this happens, and then what happens after that? I'm like, okay, so no, just to be clear, like I wrote the decommissioning logic. That's not actually how it's triggered. It's triggered, when there's a scale down event at either like the Kubernetes master or the Spark driver decides that a pod needs to go away. And there's like different behaviors here. So we can't actually just say they're the same, because like you end up with, and people will just be like, oh, okay. And it's like, it's not magic. Like there actually is a cost. Like the migrations don't happen instantly. We're putting bits across a wire. Like we're going to lose data some of the time. So like you can't just assume that this is magically going to work. Like it looks like it's working, and then I don't know. I also love it when people quote my book back to me incorrectly. It's a pretty fantastic feeling of annoyance. But like, yeah, it is frustrating, because it's like, yeah, it's, writing is a huge amount of work. Like it's especially, well, how do I say this? When you want to write correctly, it's a huge amount of work. If you don't care, it's way less work, right? Like if you want to just be like a human version of OpenAI who like kind of glances at some and throws a bunch of tokens together and calls it a blog post, like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You can crank out 10 of those. Oh God. And that's one of the things that sorry for being just this random detour, but it's one of the things that I worry about, is that like we're essentially devaluing a lot of high quality content and high quality code, because we've decided that like fast is more important for a lot of this stuff. And it's like, no, like sometimes correctness really matters, especially when you're going to teach people things, right? Like if you teach a bunch of people things that are wrong, you've actually made the world worse rather than better.
But when you're an influencer, that doesn't matter, because you got that view, and that's what matters.
That's true. That's true. You got that view. You got that follow.
But like,
yeah.
So I guess the moral of the story is, to the people watching, this isn't us being, cranky about people stealing our stuff, people writing crappy content. It's deeper than that. They're actually creating a great disservice to the entire industry and the people learning and people trying to do this, because they're either incorrect posts or they're stupid memes or whatever. They don't do us any good. It makes us all dumber.
Yeah, it's like, how do I say? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I still get annoyed when people like just straight up steal my shit. But like, it's slightly better than if they just like write things that are incredibly incorrect, right? Because it's like, well, at least you stole something that was moderately correct. Okay. And to be clear, like I'm not holding anyone to the like 100% correct bar, or saying that like, my stuff doesn't have mistakes in it, but it feels like, we're putting in enough time to try and get things right, at least. And that's really frustrating to me, because I think, but yeah, like it is important. And like one of the greatest things, I don't know if you watched the Cars 3 movie, right? But like as you get older, mentorship takes on more and more of a part of your life normally. But like the things there is like you actually have to help people, right? Like it actually needs to be useful stuff. And you actually have to teach them new skills. Otherwise, you're not helping. Yeah.
Or more importantly, I've seen some of the influencers, people become so pissed at them that they now spend a bunch of their time just being pissed at them and making posts about them that I'd never seen before. Like,
Oh yeah.
I
I've
can't imagine making somebody so mad they will spend significant chunks of their life just making stuff about me.
I mean, there are certainly people that hate me, right? Like, and so that's possible. I think it's not normally for my data content though. It's normally for my other advocacy. Well, yeah, it is one of those things. And to be clear, like there is this like short list of people who like, I'm not going to go out of my way to like make like blog posts about how I like don't like this person, but like I'm also not going to go out of my way to tell people not to do that, right? Where I'm just like, well, sucks to be you, and because it's like I don't have the energy to put into this, but like, and this like in the startup space, there's one guy who's like threatened to sue all of the people who are working on a similar idea to him. And I'm just like, I don't like you, guy. Like, that's not cool, right? Like, that's not how you play the game as a startup. That's not polite. But like, also, like, I don't know, whatever. I'm not gonna do a lot about it because, like, there's no one's crossed the threshold to me where like I will actively put in the effort to like chase you down or like buy a billboard with your picture and be like, have you seen this person? Maybe enough for me to fantasize about buying a billboard, because like I think billboards are hilarious and an underutilized craft, especially when there's billboards in your company's shared office entryway. But I am a scholar who will not stoop to such levels, mostly because I don't want to get sued. But like,
That and you're Canadian, so you'd probably be more apt to say, I'm sorry I offended you so much that you became mean to me.
I mean, it is like, how do I say this? There was certainly a fair amount of like, what did I do to make this person that upset? But then it was also just like going and talking with a bunch of the other people and being like, oh no, he's just like pissed at everyone. Okay, fine, it's not me. But that felt a lot better.
All right. Well, from Databricks, you went to Alpine Data Labs, where you were doing some early Hadoop to Spark. Just how bad was that back in the day?
It was bad. It was bad. I don't know if you remember Spork. It was like Pig, which is already kind of a monstrosity, but like take Pig, replace Hadoop with Spark, and call it a day. And that did not work well. And to be clear, so the Alpine Data Labs people are, I want to say, the nicest people that I have ever worked for. And if they called me tomorrow and were like, hey, Holden, we're making a startup, I would 100% hear them out about their next startup. Like, they're amazing people, really enjoyed working for them. And that's actually where I met my co-authors for the first edition of High Performance Spark. And so amazing people, super painful work, right? Like the work was definitely just like, oh, this is really rough. But amazing people, and really, really chill, really nice. I remember when I quit, I was just like, I'm really sorry, but like, that's my Canadianness. Yeah, I'm really sorry, but these other people came and they've offered me more than 2x the money. And the other reason why I was leaving is like, so at the time I was on something called PrEP, which is a thing to prevent acquisition of HIV, and their health insurance was really bad. And so it was like, yeah, if I stay here, it's going to cost me like a lot of money to just kind of like stay alive. So like it's just not working out for me. And they're like, we totally get it, 100%. We wish we had better health insurance, and we wish we had more money. We would totally solve this problem with money if we could, but like we can't. And they like really, really just great people. Sorry, I have to just go. They're so great. Some of them ended up as astronomer, not the CEO, to be clear, or their HR person. Neither of those roles at astronomer. But yeah, great people, really, really hard work. Met a lot of fantastic people there. But then yeah, went to IBM afterwards, because IBM just showed up with like bagfuls of money and was like, hey, what's up? Do you want money? And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I'll run Lotus Notes for that much money. Okay. Take me to your email server.
They also got a big promotion. You were principal software engineer at that point.
That's true. That was probably the first time that I like moved beyond senior. Actually, yeah, it definitely is. So yeah, it was definitely like, hey, you can be band 10, which is, you know, IBM is very into levels and bands. And so that was like, you can be band 10, you can be a principal. We'll give you a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. And so it was also a very different experience. Some great people there too. But also like definitely some weirdness where it's like, oh, you're working on Spark for System 360? I didn't realize that was a project. And also, why have I never heard of you before? Kind of like vibe. Like that was like running into people in like random hotel elevators in like Poughkeepsie. And just being like, what? Wait, that's really a project? And how have I never heard of you before? And it's just like, yeah, you're working at a company that literally employs more people than your hometown has, right? Like it makes Google look small.
Yeah, that'd be pretty weird. And then so why were they so weirded out that you're working on it? That you were doing something with Spark?
Oh no, like they were just like, it was just like the like the left hand and the right hand were so far apart, right? And like, so like you see my fantastic suit jacket that I've got on right now, right? Other thing, so one of my early experiences at IBM was they really wanted to send me to Japan. And so they told me though that I need to buy a suit for Japan. And so I did. I went to Nordstrom and I bought like an actual suit. Admittedly, an all-white suit with unfinished edges, like very, very fancy. Show up in Japan, all of a sudden, no business meetings anymore. Enjoy Japan. And it was fantastic. And because I actually went with another Spark person who was just like, okay, this is great. We're just going to hang out in Japan, work on Spark, and this is great. And so we like wandered around Japan and then wrote a bunch of Spark code because we showed up with like a San Francisco interpretation of what a suit means. And it was, you know, it was all kinds of fun. And the IBM Japan people were great. I definitely should have gotten a little bit more clarity by what they meant by suit. But that's the sort of thing that you do in your 20s when you're like, oh, okay, well, it says suit on it. That's probably what they wanted.
Yeah, they didn't quantify the level or anything like that. It's important.
Especially when you're like talking to a software engineer from San Francisco. If you tell them they need a suit, like they're gonna go and find a suit. It might not be what you think a suit is.
Or you could be like the ones who show up in a tuxedo. Did you ever see that?
Ooh, yeah.
Somebody, there was a story I saw where the guy was going to get fired, so he said, "Okay, I'm just going to go rent a tuxedo," and so they have to fire me in a tuxedo.
Oh, okay. So this reminds me. So, okay, jumping back a little bit, if it's okay. So when I was at Foursquare, I quit by singing Telegram.
Do tell.
So I mean, like, I was at the time a little bit annoyed with this HR person, right, who I had been having these disagreements with, and I was like, well, okay, I need to go out with style. What can I do that will bring style and class to my 2 weeks notice? Singing Telegram. And so back in 2011, you could still hire singing telegrams. They were not super expensive. And so I got a singing telegram to the Foursquare office to let them know that it was going to be my last 2 weeks. But I sent the email, like, I want to say like around the same time as the singing telegram. And there were, like, it was a startup, so there wasn't like good security to prevent the singing telegram from coming into the like office, right? It's super easy. And I made sure I was in New York for the time, so I could definitely get the singing telegram into the office to quit. Yeah, I forgot about that. Huh. Yeah.
So that takes the cake. One time I quit by writing on the back of a Dilbert comic. Remember there was a daily Dilbert comic?
Yeah,
and it basically summed up the problem at the company very well. And I took it off and I had saved it, and I just wrote, I quit on the back, and there you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at if I can find the message that I used. Okay, yeah, here we go. Big Apple singing telegrams.com. Yeah, okay. I used a gorilla. I tried to get a panda.
I would have gotten my money back if they didn't have a panda.
Well, no, like I knew there was like, I knew there was only a gorilla available, right? Like I went online and I looked at my options, right? And I don't remember if they actually did this. I wrote in the notes, if you have a boombox or any way to play Levels by Avicii, please do that. So
did you say the message, or they just said I quit, or what?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wanted to say goodbye with a gorilla because they're awesome. It's been great working with everyone, and I hope to see you all around.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 p.m. Yeah.
All right. If somebody ever walked up to me and said, "I don't know Holden, can you describe Holden to me?" Now I'll say, there was this one time she quit with a singing telegram dressed as a gorilla. And then I'll tell them the Japan story, and they'll be like, "Okay, I know Holden." And say no more.
Pretty accurate, actually. Yeah. I wish I had a video of that. I don't think I thought. Yeah.
Well, from there you went back to Google as an open source developer advocate. And I have in my notes that was peak Holden, but I'm wondering if that suit that you bought for Japan was actually peak Holden book beds.
I don't know. I mean, that suit was pretty fun. I will say, like, being an open source big data developer advocate at Google was, in many ways, like, maybe, the culmination of a lot of my career. It was really enjoyable. I got to work on a variety of different projects. Apache Beam, of course, being one of them, where we both tried to convince them to do different things and did not succeed at all of that. But we tried, right? And we both gave it, I like to say, a good solid shot at getting them to do the right thing. And I think I talked them out of doing several versions of the wrong thing that we can probably leave off. And yeah, gave a lot of talks, did a bunch of training, and also started working with the Dataproc team, which was up in Seattle. Was it Seattle? Well, Seattle area, right? I think it was across one of the bridges. I don't remember if it was Redmond or which actual, but that was really great. And so we also had the joke that the developer advocates at Google were all unmedicated ADHD, right? Like, if you started taking your ADHD drugs, you were going to have to transition to another role because you were going to be focusing on tasks too much. But you know, the dev advocates were always doing, like, you would always be doing like 3 or 4 different things at the same time, and that was entertaining, right? Like, I think it was certainly just like, yeah, I can do a whole bunch of stuff. I can see the world, and yeah, very occasionally I have to get involved in office politics so that I still have a job, because that's DevRel is one of those things, right, where it's like, it's difficult to measure the impact, right? And so part of your job is telling stories, and the official part of your job is telling stories to the world, and the other part of your job is telling stories to people internally that they should keep giving you money to tell stories to people. And if you can't do both of those, you're pretty soon going to be having to find a new job, which is something that I learned. And it was around that time that, like, near the end of it, that I would say the writing started to be on the wall for Google in terms of their approach to developer advocacy was shifting to things that were more closely measured, right? And so it's like, you know, they were starting to think about dev advocates much more in a like direct sales generation, not actual sales, but like, hey, we can track how successful these dev advocates are at bringing different people in. And it's like, well, you can, but then that really changes the kind of content that this person is going to be producing, right? Like, and so for me, that was like, no, this is probably not the kind of dev advocacy I want to do. And then I went back to engineering, I would say.
And that engineering was Apple.
Yeah.
Doing Spark and Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And sharing best practices. Okay, so what are those best practices that you shared?
I mean, a lot of it was like, maybe don't use Spark here, right? Like, hey, if your data can fit in memory on a MacBook, put down Spark. You've got better options. Then there was also a lot of like stuff around, okay, so like, how do we set up dynamic scaling in such a way that, you know, interactive notebooks remain usable after people have walked away for an hour? They don't just come back and everything's gone right at the end of lunch. And then there was also a lot of, okay, cool, like, this, you should not have to know what the like distribution of your data is, right? Like, if we had actually really solved this problem that is distributed computing, you would not have to know if you have a normal distribution or a skewed distribution. But we've not actually solved the problem. All we've done is built some fantastic abstractions for you. So you need to know the distribution of your data, and I'm really sorry to tell you that, because if it is super skewed, like, these are the ways that you can work around it being skewed. But it's up to you to work around it being skewed. It's not up to the system, unfortunately. So that was fascinating. And the other one there was mentoring new contributors, and so that was really great. Something I really enjoyed. Did a little bit of it at Google, not as much, but essentially getting people who are really great engineers, right, and getting them involved in the clown car that is open source, right, where it's like, okay, how do we actually get code upstream, right? Like, we've got all these like wonderful little hacks internally, but like, it's costing us money to essentially keep these up to date. So maybe let's not do that. Let's let's put these upstream. And then so helping people do that. I did that a little bit at IBM too, actually. I managed to get some people even all the way to Spark committer, which is fantastic, because that took me several years to get to. I have feelings about that. Yeah.
It's interesting you point out people think that somebody at Apple's level, so they're usually pretty good software engineers, that they would know, oh, this is when you use Spark or this is when you wouldn't. But the bifurcation is actually different. It's not, are you a really good software engineer? It's, are you a distributed systems engineer or are you a software engineer? And that's the differentiation. And so as we expand that out to what we're seeing in the problems with Kafka, the problems with all these things, we threw a bunch of distributed systems at these people with no knowledge of distributed systems and said, oh, you don't need knowledge of this, and go knock yourselves out. And then they knocked themselves out and did it wrong. And all the way the vendors were saying, yeah, do it, use it, everything.
Yeah. Don't worry about your partitioning. It's fine. Just give us money. It's great. Yeah. And then it turns out like, oh no, we didn't actually fix those problems. My bad. Yeah.
My bad. Yeah, and then you went to Netflix. From there, you were the staff open source engineer, and you were doing some Spark upgrade projects. Tell me about those Spark upgrade projects.
So when I started at Netflix, I would say that the Ryan Blue was in the process of leaving. I think he left within the first week that I started, and so like. There were still some other Spark people there, but like I think Ryan was probably the best person at Netflix at the time. So it was definitely a like, cool, here's some notes, I got a jet situation. And then I remember coming in and being like, wait, we're running Spark 2.1 in production? That's not good. Right? Like it has been end of life for several years. Right. And like, yeah, there's a bunch of things that we can do to kind of sort of make it work, but like this is fundamentally unsustainable, right? Like the machine learning team came to us and was like, hey, we need Scala 3 support in Spark 2.1. And I'm like, cool. No, that's not happening. But we can maybe get you Scala 3. Like pick one of these two and I'll make it happen for you. And they picked Scala 3. And so it was like, okay, so we have this giant code base that fundamentally, like most places, right? People don't know what it does, and they're terrified of what happens if I turn this off, right? And so then it was like, okay, we have to make tools so that we can upgrade Spark versions. And if you've never upgraded Spark versions, congratulations. I am happy for you. But essentially, Spark's approach to API compatibility is, I would say, and in reference to our earlier comment at the start about minimizing F-bombs, YOLO. Very much just like, whatever, we tried, and it didn't work. And so like all of these things, there was just so much broken stuff. And so we created tools to essentially do automated code changes. The other thing is, I don't know how many data pipelines you've seen that are super well tested. The majority of data pipelines are not well tested in my experience, right? And so a lot of people were like, yeah, listen, like it compiles, but I don't feel comfortable. Like, what about if there has been a semantic change in how this is treated? Like, what about if my, data is now incorrect? I don't feel confident. So we built tooling there to help them sort of say like, hey, we can run two versions of this side by side for you, and we can do shadow writes to like sort of use Iceberg to stage writes that don't actually get committed. And then we can go and say like, hey, do these staged writes look similar to the ones of your actual production pipeline? If so, okay, cool. And if not, well, damn it, we're going to have to come back to this and investigate it. And so it was a lot of tooling to help get people on a modern version of Spark so we could get rid of supporting all of this old stuff. And in theory, focus on making cool new stuff inside of a modern version of Spark to help people be successful. It was a fun project. It was also like all migration projects, kind of. But it was fantastic, and got to work with a really wide mixture of staff, from like new hires to like one of the guys that I was working with. And like, to be clear, the new hires were amazing too, right? Like super committed. But like one of them was like one of the more experienced members of staff was like looking at a run and was like, the S3 data load time is a little long. I'm going to fire up Wireshark to like see what's going on, because something is funky here, right? And it's just like, okay, this, not my first hop to, right? And like actually fix things, and like the S3A connector that we were using, right? And it's just like, okay, yeah, this is some interesting stuff, right? And yeah, it was fun. It was definitely also a lot of work. I would say it was like more work than Apple and Google. Netflix has a reputation for running lean that I think is well deserved, right? Like these Spark teams will be very small compared to like a similar team at an Apple or a Google.
So if you were to give somebody a suggestion or recommendation on migration, on a Spark migration specifically,
Yeah.
other than not to, what would it be? Just one suggestion.
Shadow rights are your friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised I've never heard that before. I'd seen that with other things, like if you're doing this with legacy software and you're replacing, let's say, a REST call, you would do a shadow write to that REST call. But I hadn't thought of the S3 shadow write. That's interesting.
Yeah. So we did it at the iceberg layer, which worked for the majority of things. We still had a few things that were still on Hive, and so that didn't work for the Hive pipelines. So we had to get them upgraded to iceberg first. And it also, didn't work for like Kafka, because we didn't have like a Kafka shadowing system set up. So it wasn't perfect, right? And it also, like, the machine learning folks were a little like, like, how do I compare my model? And I'm like, well, we can't really compare your model because it's a non-deterministic thing that you're producing, but we can probably assume that if the data going in is the same, like your weird model code is probably going to behave the same. So like, let's just write your data out right before we train the model, and we can do the validation on that step. And they didn't entirely buy that, but I think that was reasonable. I think part of the reason why it's not super common is like, it's really expensive, right? Like you're literally running 2 copies of everything. And like, that's a lot of money. On the flip side, I think it's an expense that's well worth it.
Oh, it is. All right, well, let's get to the whiteboarding session. How can you fight health insurance with AI?
Totally. So I think probably one of the places where we can sort of get into this is like what the problem with health insurance is, right? And so let's start with sort of our problem statement. And so our problem is that insurance denies things that should be covered, right? And there's a bunch of different ways that they do this, but that's like sort of the core problem. And so we can appeal these denials. And so we've got, let's make some circles. You've got like, we're going to call them provider. We've got our provider here. You can see that I definitely not going to win Graphic Designer of the Year award. Patient, insurance, and then we're going to make a little AI bot over here. Okay, cool. So normally your provider will send something to the insurance, right? And so they will go ahead and they're going to submit a claim for you. And then what'll happen is the insurance will deny that claim, right? So they'll send a denial back to the provider, but they'll also send a denial to you. Where's my little, there we go. Sorry, clicking on denial. Yeah, and then denial. Okay, cool. So your provider will send something to the insurance. The insurance will send back like no, but they're obligated to tell you no at the same time as well. So then at this point, either the provider or the patient can appeal, right? And so at this point, what you do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to take your denial and you're going to send it over to Fight Health Insurance or someone else, right? And then you're going to denial info. And then we're going to go back and we're going to generate an appeal. And so you have the right to appeal. And this part we can generate with a large language model, right? And then the patient can go ahead, take that appeal, send it back to the insurance company. And then hopefully they will approve it and pay. So then at that point, we'll see like an approval flow through. So one of the questions is like, do you need generative AI? And the answer is no, right? Like you can write an appeal yourself. But the thing is, writing an appeal is a lot of work. And right now, people spend a lot of money and time on this, or frankly, they just give up because they don't know what to do, right? Like they don't know what an appeal should look like, right? I do because I've been dealing with American health insurance for long enough that like I know what the acronym ERISA stands for. I know that like I've got 2 levels of appeal followed by a statutory review. I know that general and it's like, but that's weird, right? Like most people will get a denial from their insurance company and then give up or go and talk to their provider. And the providers are so overwhelmed because the number of denials keep going up that they don't have time to appeal all these denials anymore. And yeah, that's sort of the like super high level of like how AI fits into the workflow, right? Like AI fits in at the like, you've got a denial, let's generate an appeal for you. There's some other places where it could go into, and some other companies are doing stuff here. So there is one company which claims to look at claims from providers and sort of flag them in advance for if they're likely to be denied by insurance companies. And I think that's useful, but it's not entirely useful because it's still like doesn't help with the root problem of like, hey, we need to get this treatment approved and paid for, right? It tells the provider like this claim is at risk and you can try adding more information to make it successful. But I will say that I think a lot of times it's not being denied for a lack of information. It's just being denied by the insurance company out of hand. So having this additional information, I'm not convinced it's actually going to make a difference. But, this is one of those like, money flowers bloom situations. Certainly, I think there's a possibility for having AI make better initial claims, and maybe that will decrease the denial rate a little bit as well. I think we still need AI to appeal the denials, though, because I think the denial rate is still going to be in excess of what is reasonable.
So as you look at this LLM, what LLM are you using?
Yeah, so we are using a fine-tuned in-house LLM. It's a Gemma-derived LLM currently. Previously, we've used different base models. We've used Llama base model. And so we're using open source LLMs, but we're fine-tuning it on claim data. And to me, that's an important part. And so we can talk about sort of the things that go into fine tuning it, or we could talk about sort of like the data that we put into the context window to make the LLM be able to do its job.
Well, let's talk about both because I think both are useful. So let's go to two. And
Okay, cool.
as well as, I think you're the first person I've talked to doing a fine-tuned Gemma. I've only talked to people doing fine-tuned Llama.
Yeah. So we use Oxalotl to abstract some of our fine tuning. We also played around with Unsloth, but I found that the code was not very reliable. Like it would break more frequently than I wanted. Like all of these AI tools break pretty frequently, but the Unsloth code would break more than the other ones. Part of it is that like they didn't really pin many of their dependencies, so stuff would get upgraded, and it's the joys of Python, which I'm pretty sure is later on in our conversation. So
More fodder for the conversation.
We can save that for a little bit later. But yeah, so how do we fine tune it? So to be clear, there are many different ways to fine tune it, but let's go ahead. So the question is like, where does our data come from fundamentally, right? And so there's a few different places. So IRB data, independent, can't spell for shit. Wait, well, let me spell check that. There we go. Review. Independent review data. De-identified user claim data. And so this is just going to be like kind of a bit of a
like a smorgasbord of various inputs.
Yeah. So here we're going to go ahead and we're going to produce a few different things out of it. Yeah, actually, wait. Yeah, let's go. Yeah. Yeah. Synthetic denials. And synthetic payments. And we also have the other thing that we produce here, which is like, I joke that my handwriting is bad enough. I should have gone to medical school, but synth chats. Actually, that's not true. We produce okay. Synthetic appeals. Yeah. And then here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a won't let me draw get bigger. No, let me resize it. Okay, let's go. We're going to call this training data. So these feed into training data. This actually feeds directly into training data. But then these also come together to produce Since chats, okay. Oh, and there's okay. Delete. And then detail extraction. Everything goes back to training data, really, at the end of the day. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Synthetic denials, synthetic appeals, detail extraction. Oh, yeah. And then we also have QA generation. So the other thing that we want to do as part of this is often there's not enough information alone in a denial to generate an appeal. So we want to know, like, what information did the institutional review board or independent review board, find to be relevant. And so we've got a QA generation as well, which comes off of this data set. And it also comes off of this data set. And then that goes into the training data pile, or compost heap, I think is the vogue term as of maybe last week. Independent review data, QA generation, synth denials, synth appeals, synth chat, detail extraction. I'm gonna actually go ahead and fire up. Got Emacs over here. I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at our stuff. Health insurance LLM, and we're gonna go final_spark. What is the other data set that we're gonna do? IMR, DID, Gen. Oh, we all okay, yeah. The CPT code extraction is pretty much detail extraction too. Patient history, that's the QA part, and entity extraction, that's the detail extraction. Oh, the other thing that we do, and this is sort of incidental, and this is because we're using OCR, and synthetic synth OCR errors, and that goes in here, as do you. There we go. And so that's just because essentially, because we're using client-side OCR rather than directly using the model, the large language model, to do OCR, we get some OCR errors. And so we want to introduce synthetic OCR errors and then have their correction. And we want to essentially, it biases it more towards the medical terminology that we're more likely to find, rather than like sort of the generic OCR training data set that the OCR model is that we're using. And this is done largely for privacy reasons. So by doing the OCR client side, we're able to not have to have the full denial, and we can strip out bits of PAI and PHI that are not necessarily needed for generating the appeal before it gets sent to the server. Because I have this general belief that the best way to like not accidentally screw up is to just not have that information to begin with. So if I can make it so that I never have to touch it, even better. But there is a bit of a downside in that we're stuck with OCR models that we're able to run on the client, and those aren't quite as good. So we do a little bit of sort of hacking around that to try and have the large language model fix possible OCR errors that may have been introduced.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of this, you get your fine-tuned LLM, and then your fine-tuned LLM is what you use to do the appeals from there.
Yeah, and so the training data gets fed into Oxalotl with various configuration parameters, and that is what produces our large language model that we use to do the appeals.
Okay. And then basically around that LLM, you're just writing the rest of the probably web UI that does the REST calls into it.
yeah, I mean, there's the client side OCR, there's the weird chat interface, there's the like flow where we go through and like, essentially ask the LLM different things at different stages, and then we ask the user like, hey, this is how we did entity extraction. Do these entities look correct, right? And that's also in the de-identified claim data. So actually, this data, I forgot a line. But anyways, like we do this, and then the core is fundamentally the LLM that's produced from this training data, and then there's like a bunch of stuff around it to make it so that it's actually usable to someone who doesn't want to like run a Python interpreter to deal with their health insurance claim.
So as you look at this, what were some of the data challenges you hit with this?
Yeah, so the independent review data varies from state to state. Classic problem, right? Inconsistent schemas and inconsistent reporting requirements. So making the synthetic appeals is a little funky, right? So we have some like sketchy normalization stuff that we try and do. The other one is de-identifying the user claim data. We have a human do some manual reviews there to make sure that we haven't screwed it up, because that's important. The other one is, right, like, so this synthetic appeals and synthetic denials, like that's a little hand wavy in that it's coming off of the independent medical review data. And that involves actually calling another LLM, because the independent review data has the information, but it's not in the format that we want. And LLMs are reasonably good at taking information in one format and transforming it to another format. And so that's great, except it turns out that calling LLMs inside of a map task in Spark kind of sucks, right? And there's a variety of reasons why. But so that part is a little bit annoying. And so we have like a pile of kind of annoying Python code, which I don't really love, but Python is the language that people tend to do for this stuff, where we essentially say like, hey, is the LLM getting back to us in a reasonable time, and does our own retry logic, which we would normally like leave up to Spark, but because the failure rate on these LLMs is so high, and Spark's approach to like errors is very much based on the idea of like, I only encounter an error if a machine has failed, so like that doesn't happen often. It just wouldn't work. So we have to do a bunch of our own sort of internal retry logic, which I don't love, but it's there. And I suspect we're going to see different primitives coming to Spark to deal with this. If not Spark itself, like higher level abstractions on top of Spark. One of the things that I think about is like Spark kind of like has the assumption that map tasks are inexpensive, right? And like that's no longer necessarily 100% true. So I think we need a way in Spark and other similar systems to express that a map task actually is expensive, and so we should do things differently here.
And to be clear, it's expensive because it's making an expensive call to an LLM, which is taking up resources on an LLM.
Yeah, and it costs a combination of money and also way more time than anything else.
Okay. Is there anything else novel or interesting that you think would be whiteboard worthy?
I mean, I think one of the points here that is just useful to think about is like your data doesn't have to be directly in the format of the thing that you're trying to accomplish, but you do need something, right? Like this isn't just all purely synthetic, like hocus pocus. It's not in the format that we wanted, and we can do a format transformation, but there has to be something at the basis of your fine tuning. Otherwise, don't bother fine tuning.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's interesting where we see the garbage data in, garbage data out, but what we're missing is that quantification of what garbage data is, because I think it went down for LLMs where when we're doing something with Spark normally, we need something very well maintained. We want that in a
super structured
format, something super structured. And the bar lowered for the LLMs, but it didn't go all the way down. There's still a bar there.
Yeah, it's not zero. It's not zero.
Okay. And one thing I thought would be interesting is you touched on it before, but how exactly does Spark and Python communicate? If you can go to Whiteboard 3 for that.
Right. So, and there's sort of like two cases, right? There's the executor case and there's the driver case. And so the executor case is actually, in my mind, somewhat more interesting because that's the one where the majority of data like is actually flowing, right? In the driver, we tend to have relatively small amounts of data flowing. Not 100% of the time true, but like generally. So the data like will be coming into the JVM. So like this could be read, shuffle, etc. Right? So we've got some data that's flowing into the JVM, and then from the JVM, we've got the data has to then flow over to Python and then back. Now, if you're using the new fancy stuff, right, this could be Arrow, right? If we're lucky. We're lucky, Arrow. Okay, and then also,
And just real quick, Arrow being a shared memory way of moving, not really moving data, but sharing data between the processes.
so in theory, yes. In practice, no. It's even worse than you have imagined. So we don't actually make shared, unless things have changed, which is possible. I haven't looked at this for like probably a few versions. We don't actually use shared memory buffers properly here. We're sort of depending on the fact that it's the same trick that we've always depended on in Spark, where it's like the OS is probably going to do something relatively smart if I do something relatively dumb with files or pipes. So we're depending on the OS doing something smart for us. So there's no guarantee. It's not like a proper shared memory buffer that we've allocked. It's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is, but like, and this is the thing, like we could use Arrow with a proper shared memory buffer. It is really hard. So we don't currently. Now it's sorry, I should say, like last I checked, we did not. It's been a little while, right? I've been out of the game for at least 6 months. And you know, we're at a time where 6 months could be someone got around to implementing this. The other thing that we have going across is cloud pickle, cloud pickled, cloud pickled data and functions. So the other thing that we have to do is the Python VM doesn't actually have the data or it doesn't have the function that we're asking it to evaluate. So we have to get the function to the Python executor, right? And those tend to be, we have this really cool tool called Cloud Pickle, which everyone uses. And it kind of sort of works. And we use that to send the Lambda over to the Python VM to execute. And so if we're lucky, it's Arrow. Arrow is reasonably efficient, right? But we're still having to probably copy the data, right? And we're definitely having to transform it because when it's landing in the JVM, it's not landing in Arrow format, right? It's landing in some other format. And it might actually be landing on disk, and then the JVM is reading it from disk and then sending it over to Python. That's more likely the case for a shuffle or something like that. But it could also be if you've got the shuffle service where you do a remote read. And then like a lot of this is just kind of hoping that we get lucky with the there's an OS level page cache essentially where like it's going to decide like, hey, these bits of files are important, so I should keep them in memory. And we're just kind of like, yeah, Linux is pretty good. Let's call it a day. And the answer is like, yeah, Linux is often pretty good, not 100%. Yeah, but then it's great. And these will often both be inside a container together. That's fantastic, except if we ask Python to read too much, and then Python and Java don't really talk to each other very well, as you can see from this kind of sketchy graph. So they might allocate more memory than they can strictly speaking get, and then everything fails with everyone's favorite Spark out of memory exception. It's fantastic. You can control this by setting the essential number of rows that we're going to move across the wire from the JVM to Python. But it's not great.
And I think you didn't draw the elephant that's holding all this up, so I'm just going to draw a quick elephant that's there. Long touch screen. Here we go. There's the elephant. Maybe you need two elephants to hold this one up.
Yeah, I think this is in the Terry Pratchett world, this would be the four turtles.
Okay. Four turtles. Okay.
Yeah, because you've got a turtle underneath Python, you've got a turtle underneath Arrow, you've got a turtle underneath Java, and you definitely have a turtle underneath Pickle. And like this is the executor case, and the executor case is actually simplified from the driver case, because in the driver case, we actually have a lot of calls flowing from Python to Java, and we have a lot more data possibly flowing from Python to Java, in addition to these like return values. And so there we also get into our friend Py4j and stuff like that, which is kind of funky. And it's a way to call Java functions over an IPC bridge. It uses like Unix sockets, I think. It might use TCP/IP sockets, but like you're essentially just like asking another function to call some stuff in Java, and it does not always work super well. And like to be clear, I'm not saying that Py4j, like the Py4j developers have made things that were like almost impossible possible, and that's heckin' rad, right? Like they've done amazing work, especially like it predates the ability for like almost any useful tools or like any of the proper interoperability existing between multiple languages and Java. So like they did pretty much almost impossible things.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about it later, but a recommendation that you and I talked about is there's a new thing from Java called JEP.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't know if you tried it out, but I've been pleasantly surprised with it.
I have not. But like, yeah. Yeah. If anyone like wants to see the Arrow stuff and like see how this is actually done, the files to look at inside of Spark are Python rdb.scala and Python arrow input.scala and Python arrow output.scala. And that's where you can see we're just streaming this data across an IPC bus and hoping the OS does the right thing for us.
As one does.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings us to another part of this. So let's go to 4, and that is, I want to discuss Python. Does Python suck? And I'll give my opinion because I think that we're headed toward this apocalypse of bad Python code. And this bad Python code is coming from two sources in particular. It's coming from GenAI, which is absolutely terrible for generating Python code. But it's also coming from the data scientists and the vibe coders. They're all being told, hey, go write your code in Python. So what's wrong with Python? Well, the GenAI, it seems like the prompt turns around and says, would you like me to write some terrible junior code, copy and paste this around so that when you think you're changing this, you're actually changing that? Or the other one is, would you like me to create a bunch of technical debt for you while I output this? And I say this because I'm hitting the I'm going through and rewriting a bunch of Python code into Java because I got tired of the lack of typing. So I know, yes, I completely understand there is typing in Python, but yes, as you rightly point out, it's kind of sort of, there's even in version 3, there's 2 different typing. It's all just type hints. I got tired of the constant runtime errors. And so, yes, and then the testing. And so the conclusion I came to is I still like Python for small things, 100 lines of code or less, go for it. If it's going to become or will become anything greater than that, go straight to Java, because you need types in there, you need compiling, you need that, because I think having went back and forth between the LLMs, between Java and Python lately, I think the LLMs actually output better Java code, not because Java's a better language, and I'm not saying Java's a better language, Python's a worse language. I'm more saying Java creates more maintainable code, and the LLMs can create more maintainable code, and you could refactor it better and faster. What's your take?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things here at play, right? So yes, types, tests, but then it's also like, okay, so in Python, I think there's this weird funky thing where a lot of Python libraries are not fundamentally written in Python, and that's just kind of unique, right? Like most Scala is also like in this weird place where a lot of Scala libraries are like technically Java code-ish, right? But a lot of Scala libraries are in Scala. Most Java libraries are in Java. Occasionally, very occasionally, there's like bits of C thrown in there. Whereas in Python, it's much more normal where Python is just wrapping a layer of Rust code or a layer of, some other code. And one of the things that I think about is it's in libraries where we tend to see things like really good typing, really good tests. And that's because, we're designing these things to be reused frequently. And a lot of like one-off applications, even in Scala, will be like, you built it for a thing, right? Maybe it's got like minimal test coverage. But the impact on LLMs is that like when they look at Python code, they're just like, nah, why tests? Why types? I don't see this, right? Like I don't see that very frequently represented, so I'm not going to generate that code, right? Because they're just, they're fancy, they're very fancy, right? But like they need to see examples. And if the average Python code does not have great typing or test coverage, then they're not going to bother with good typing or test coverage. Now, there's things that I think we could do, and there's a company that I'm talking with, and it's possible that we might do a little project with them where we like try and make an LLM generate better code using their library. And so we would like work on good fitness functions to try and like better fine tune it. And so that's the other way that you fine tune, right? Like in addition to like having concrete examples, you also have like fitness function, or like, you've got your cost function, and essentially you could make a cost function that says like, if you generate Python code without types, you score 0. And then, the LLMs will start generating more Python code with types. But like, that's a lot of work. Fine tuning an LLM, that only makes sense if you are a library vendor or like a vendor of some type, right? So maybe we'll see Databricks make, their, I don't know what their Copilot thing is called, but like maybe we'll see them teach it to generate maintainable PySpark code. But I'm not going to hold my breath on it, right? When I can just go and generate relatively maintainable Scala or Java code today. And I do think there's this interesting thing of like, if your language, so Python, super popular, right? Tons of examples, really easy to use LLMs to generate Python code. Less so with Scala, right? And to an extent, this actually means that like you're less likely to get more garbage Scala code that is the result of an LLM generating it. And so your input for future LLMs will be higher quality for longer. And so maybe we'll continue to like the fact that it like is not able to generate things is actually good. Which is like maybe weird and counterintuitive. But like I think this is a distinct possibility where like being weird may actually be beneficial, right? Like not having the LLMs understand you is actually good. Or like, anyways, yeah. And I think also it's just like fundamentally, right? Like this is sort of a it is a cultural difference that exists between the communities, right? So like I think about Perl, right, which didn't make it through the world. Like Python sort of came and ate Perl's lunch, but like I think about like why it was so difficult to get that Perl code running and keep it running at at Amazon. And it's like, well, Perl culturally came from like a very different background. It didn't come from like a software engineering background. And so it has very much get her done sort of vibes, right? And like you can get a lot done in Perl. Can't keep it running for the life of me, but like you can get a lot done. Similarly in Python, a lot of times it's like you look at the incentives that these people have, right? It's like they're being told like, hey, I need you to answer this business question for me really quickly. What is the answer? Or like, hey, the deadline for my research paper is this day. I need it working. If it's not working, we don't publish. I don't get tenure, and I have to go and like get a real job and join grown-ups. And that doesn't sound appealing to anyone. By the way, if you're in academia, consider leaving. But it is like this thing where it's like, what are the incentives of the people, and then what does that result culture-wise? And so I don't think that Python is bad, and I don't think Python programmers are bad. I think honestly, Python has some of like the friendliest hacking community that I have ever worked in. And I love working with people in the Python space compared to the Scala space, right? Like I don't think you're going to meet anyone in the Scala community who is like, wow, I really wish, actually you might, but they're probably not the people that I want to work with. But like, you know, it's just very different motivations, right? Like, and what kind of things are those people going to produce? And it's like, if your goal is to make something quick and fast, right? Like I think we both agree, Python is amazing for like, you want to prototype something quickly, you want to explore something. Yeah, Python is great. The problem is when it's 3 years later and you have to keep it running, right? That's, and sometimes it's not even 3 years. Sometimes it's 3 months, right? And you're like, oh God, especially with this LLM generated slop. My co-founder and I have different ideas as to how much we should let LLMs go wild in our code base. And that definitely, shows up in our code reviews, I would say. Where I'm just like, no. But, on the flip side, like for a startup, right? Like your thing is like, the default path for a startup is you die, right? Like your startup is not successful is the default. So you have to build something that people want before you run out of money. And maybe that's Python. And maybe that's why we're seeing so much Python usage. It's just like, there's so much pressure to do something now. And we'll deal with the consequences in 6 months. But then, 6 months turns into a year and then, okay. But on the plus side, for people like me, this is fantastic. My job is to make all this work, right? Like at the end of the day, yeah, I'm appealing health insurance denials right now, but like I'm an infrastructure engineer, right? Like my job is how do I make these fundamentally inefficient solutions more efficient, and how do I handle that at scale? And this is fantastic. We are going to have so much terrible PySpark code generated that I have so many opportunities for coming up with cool optimizations. But this is going to be amazing. I'm excited about this world because I think there's going to be so much crap that we get to fix, It's going to be great. And maybe like the answer is like we build tools like Spark Upgrade that migrate, but we build it with LLMs to help you migrate your Python code to Java, and we do a bunch of stuff where we like help you, because we can't do it entirely automatically, but like we build tooling to help you productionize your existing Python code and turn it into something that is like statically type checked, compiled. Even in Spark though, right? Like there's like Scala Spark, right? Like there's questions like with like, hey, I've written this thing, but like when I connect it to my like prod data, like it falls over. So I think there's opportunities for doing it there where we just like talk to your prod, catalog and go like, hey, like, does this table match my data set definition? And then we like throw an early error before you run it into production, and we go like, hey, you're right, it doesn't exist. Like, what's up? Yeah. Anyways, I'm excited for our future, but I'll admit it's like it's an excitement that is also tempered with a like a little bit of worry. There was a company which will remain nameless that called some of their pipelines polar bear killers because of how much power they used. And I'm a little bit worried that we're going to get a bunch of those by accident. But I'm also super optimistic about green power, and that we'll fix things at a deeper level that let us continue to be lazy humans, which is what we do best.
I've never heard the polar bear killers, but yeah, I think that's you're right. That's probably the silver lining in this, that at some point somebody's going to realize that they need some help. But I'm also less optimistic about even that, where usually the people who are not good enough to write their code well are also too high of their ego or too proud of their ego to actually ask for the help to get that done right.
Yeah, I think that's why it's going to fall to the engines to fix a lot of this stuff, where we essentially go and like, oh, you're asking me for crazy stuff. What do you actually like? Essentially, like, we're going to have to build incredibly good optimizers. I mean, we both have strong opinions about Python. I think I probably like it a little bit more than you do. But it's also because there's so much untyped Python code out there, right? The LLMs are fundamentally going to keep generating more untyped Python code. And it's also just, it's not great, right? Because, and I really think this comes down to the like libraries are largely written in other languages, right? Like even we look at Spark, it's largely written in Java. We look at Daft, it's largely written in Rust. We look at like Pandas, it's largely written in C, right? Like this is the thing, right? Like the big building blocks of it are actually built in separate languages. So the LLMs don't have these examples of these massive projects that are built with really good typing or really good testing, because they're all kind of not actually built in Python itself. And the like large Python projects that are like more pure Python tend to be in-house to a company, and they're not open source in the same way. There's of course exceptions, like Django is built in Python, right, to a large degree, but especially in the data space, the LLMs just don't have good examples, and if they don't have good examples, they're going to generate crap.
Yeah, but I think there's an even deeper fundamental problem that is kind of this perfect storm of data scientists and all these new people that are coming in to some sort of gold rush, not realizing what they're hitting with the LLM code. And and we have but I also wonder, or maybe this is me being a Java person, or me being a more computer science person, is the patterns, the design patterns are just non-existent in Python.
Yeah, and I think it's both a strength and a weakness for Python, right? Like it has made it so that so many people can come and bring such great ideas and solve such interesting problems. But it's also like, yeah, we don't have that same formalization where, as I would say, like, the other thing is, like, as part of teaching someone, Scala or Java, you normally teach them testing, right? Like, that's part of the curriculum. Teaching someone how to do data science, we haven't made that part of the curriculum, in part because it's really hard. And if people don't really like hard things, right? And it hasn't been around long enough to really feel the true pain that comes from these, like, unmaintainable code bases, right? And I think the other thing is, like, if we think back to, like, the Netflix project, right? Like, part of why we had to build that stuff with the shadow rights is there was, like, no test coverage, right? It's just like, or not no test coverage, but, like, there were so many data pipelines where people were just like, I literally do not know how to tell if this is working or not, right? And that is not good, right? Like, it's totally understandable to be a little bit anxious about changing a massive library, but, like, in a lot of cases, when I'm doing an upgrade, I have a pretty good way of telling if it worked or not, right? Like, it might be painful, but at the very least, I can know that it's broken because I've had a very different sort of focus on how I build software, and it's like, are they building software? Fundamentally, technically, yes, but they're not following the software engineering principles because it's not where they're coming from. And to be clear, like, I have a bachelor's of mathematics with, like, computer science, and I don't think I mean, I learned a little bit about making maintainable code in university, but, like, I don't think that's really where I learned how to make maintainable code. I learned it from working with other people in industry who had built things and were just like, oh God, no, this is not how we make maintainable software. Holden, like, you're not putting that in production. I don't trust it, right? And so it's a cultural issue as well, right? Where it's just like, data science, I think, comes from more of an academic culture, almost, in a way, where maybe software development life cycles are not as much of a thing versus sort of an industrial life cycle where it's like, no, I don't want to get woken up at 2:00 in the morning. Like, screw you. I'm not putting this in production. Right. And the answer for, like, I don't want to get woken up at 2:00 in the morning for, like, an academic paper is, like, don't run it at 2:00 in the morning. Obviously. But, like, that doesn't work for, like, movie recommendations. People want their movie recommendations.
So related to the testing, of all the things I'm surprised about, you remember when the strike, the writer strike was going on, and there's a person held up the sign that said, "I thought AI would do my dishes so that I could write my stories." Basically, I'd have to find exactly what it said, but it was that sentiment of, I thought AI was going to do this stupid thing that I don't really like doing.
Yeah.
And it turned out to do the thing, and start doing the thing that I really like doing, writing. And I feel like the same is true for programming, where most people, myself included, hate doing unit tests. I hate doing unit tests with a passion. And I thought, oh, great, we're going to get these LLMs that can write my unit tests for me so I don't have to do it. But what it turns out is actually the inverse, because in order to write a good unit test, you need to understand what you're doing, and then you can write that unit test.
Yeah, I think it is a continual state of, like, AI not quite living up to its desired outcomes, right? And I think, and actually, relatedly, like, last night I was making a little thing for my, like, I've got a classic iPod and switched it to USB-C, but the USB-C connector is obviously smaller than the classic connector. And so it's like, well, I need a little piece to go in here. I suck at CAD. So I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I can, I don't know, this seems like a relatively simple piece. Maybe I can just like ask OpenAI to make an STL for me. And it's like, oh, no, this STL is terrible. Right? It's like 700 shapes. Like the one that I ended up printing that fits and works fine is 2 shapes. Right? It's not at all complex. And yeah, it is like, yeah, it is frustrating. But it's we're automating a lot of the fun parts. But I still think, and I mean, this is maybe my bias. Like I love the learning and the adventure part. And part of that is like figuring out like what the hell something is doing. And so there is a joy in figuring out what the fuck this thing is doing. But it is also like taking a lot of the fun parts and leaving a lot of like, yeah, I don't really want to write end-to-end functional tests, but I can't leave it to the AI to write end-to-end functional tests because there's no example of what a good end-to-end functional test is for this, because of course it's something new. Whereas it's like, yeah, okay, this is a new, like I'm just putting something on a screen over in this corner. There's tons of examples of doing that. It can go do that for me. It's kind of sad. Yeah, oh man, yeah. I don't remember how many years ago this was, but we definitely did explore a little bit of this at Netflix. Because like one of our questions was like, cool, maybe we can automate adding more tests because like people need some level of confidence in their pipelines. So like one option is shadow writes. The other option is like maybe we can auto-generate tests that are like reasonably good. Didn't work out back then. There's definitely like an interesting thought experiment, and maybe we'll get there. Like maybe someone will make the LLM that generates really good tests for us someday. I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up coming out of like the Code Rabbit folks or someone similar. I think there's a chance there, but like, yeah, it's not anytime soon.
Okay. Well, let's turn it around then. What are you excited for in this future?
What am I excited for in our future?
Yeah.
I mean, this is maybe weird, but like I'm really excited for a opportunity for investments in engines to make a lot of sense, right? Like I think as more people vibe code and as we get more essentially just like not very well done stuff, I think there's more opportunity at the lower levels of the stack to try and make it all work. And I think it means like investments in like compilers, investments in like weird thinking, right? Where it's just like historically we like compilers have been free for the past decade because like, why are you going to charge for dev tools? Dev tools are free. But I do think that there might be room for another generation of dev tools to sort of work alongside the LLMs. And I'm excited for that as a tools person. I think it's pretty cool. I'm also excited for, and I don't think it's there yet, but I'm excited for more people being empowered to ask questions of data, right? Like, I don't think we should necessarily do them. I don't think we should take the output of an LLM and immediately shove it into production. But like, I'm excited for the PM who maybe didn't know SQL to be able to like toy around with some things, right? I think it's really cool to empower them, and I think there's a chance that it might start to like be able to generate PySpark code or Spark Connect code as well. And I think this is interesting, and it could unlock a bunch of stuff. It could also go terribly, right? Like it's I think about this, right? And a lot of it is with Fight Health Insurance too, where it's like we're at an inflection point where we have a new technology and we don't know how it's going to end up getting used. So like I'm cautiously optimistic that we will find good places to use it and not just automate writing or programming, like not just automate the fun parts of our world, but like I think there's a chance that we can use it for good. I'm overly optimistic though. And alternatively, you know, I've got a motorcycle. I'm pretty excited to go ride my motorcycle a bunch.
Let's ask you one last question. You've written 9 books. I went and counted. At least you're credited on 9 books. Is there a path to writing this much?
So I do. This is maybe weird, but I am a firm believer in the best way to learn something is to teach something, right? And maybe this is old school, but I feel like the act of writing a book is the act of distilling teaching into something. I do worry about our future for technical writing. I worry about our future for writing in general, because like I think writing is amazing, and I'm going to be so bummed out if that ends up going away. I will be very, very sad. But like I think so one of the things that I will say is that having written a book about a topic means that when you get interviewed about that topic, if that person has read that book, you are probably going to have a pretty easy interview. That doesn't get you very far, but like it does get you a lot of the way. I think I'm reminded of like when I was like, 19, presenting as a dude, interviewing. People just kind of like generally assumed that I knew what I was doing, even though like I do not think I knew what I was doing, looking back in retrospect. And I lost some of that at one point in my life, but having written some books helped regain some of that like assumption that like, yeah, okay, she probably knows what she's doing, at least here, right? Because like she wrote a book about it. It's useful, but like it's not generally transferable, right? Like I've written a book about Spark, Dask, and Ray, but like if I want to go work on something that's not Spark, Dask, or Ray, or Kubeflow, like it's going to be super painful, unless I happen to be fortunate enough that like the people building the thing have used these other tools before. They've heard of you. It's weird. I don't know. I like writing though, and I'm really. This is maybe a bit of a random detour. I really want to write a book about Hamburger University, which is the McDonald's University, because I think there's probably some fascinating stuff there. That's maybe a bit of a detour, but which the startup life is not super conductive to, I will say. My editor is probably not super amused at our rate of progress on High Performance Spark 2nd edition ever since I started at the startup. It's been a little slow.
Well, I'm sure they don't really have a choice.
I mean, they do. They could go with my co-author, but my co-author is also pretty busy. So yeah. Yeah, I think they'll wait. I mean, it's O'Reilly. They're generally. My editor will be mad at me for saying this, but like generally speaking, they'll wait, right? Like it's. I think it's understood that. I mean, the author overdue on their book deadline is such a stereotype at this point, right? That like It's almost not even worth mentioning. I love the sound of. I love deadlines. I love the sound of them whooshing past. Right, is like one of the famous expressions. But I do want to get High Performance Spark 2nd edition done sometime this year. So I'm hopeful we'll get it done in time for a December print run. I don't know what the odds of that are though. But I feel like we're close.
All right, Holden. Well, so you give you enough time to start working on ebooks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. You're out of everybody that I've interviewed, I think I know you the best. So it's been interesting even finding out more about you. So thank you again for sharing so openly.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to chat. I really like it.